I'm very excited to be able to introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Romi Ran, who is a British clinical psychologist, a coach, and a speaker. Romi provides one-on-one sessions to clients from across the globe, as well as conducts workshops and seminars to businesses, hotels, and wellness venues across the UK, Europe, and the Americas. Romi received her doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of Oxford in the UK. She has experience utilizing various treatment models, including cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy, as well as mindfulness-based approaches and solution-focused therapy. Prior to her doctorate, Romi actually completed her dialectical behavioral therapy training and worked as a DBT therapist in several outpatient and hospital settings with adults engaging in suicidal and parasuicidal behaviors. Additionally, she's worked as a research coordinator in the Department of Psychology at Harvard University, where she was involved in several research studies focused on the field of self-harm and suicide. Romi has also devoted much of her time and interest to exploring Eastern meditative practices, particularly those of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Her continual studies and dedicated meditative practice both inform and enhance her professional work, but also she is interested personally in sharing the often unknown and overlooked overlap between Eastern traditions and psychology. She recognizes the importance of both for transformational growth. And when she is not working, and as you can tell, she's got a lot of great things going on professionally. When Romi is not working, she also enjoys dancing, traveling, and hiking with her husband and two young kids and a dog named Freud. So without any further ado, please join me in giving a warm Teacher Wellness Summit welcome to our next speaker, and we'll allow Dr. Romi Ran to take the stage and be able to share her screen and show us her presentation.
Thank you so much, Gary, and what an honor to be here and be able to share it with you all today. I will just share my screen. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to launch straight into this because we have quite a lot to cover. And, I'd love to be able to have time at the end for questions and answers and everything else. So today we will be talking about stress. I don't think I would need to do a poll to see how many people say that they experience stress. I think it's pretty much a given, but I think what I'd really love to do today is to explore what stress actually is. So understand what stress is and what it is that we can do about it. And I'm going to start, I've got this, we've got two fish in the bowl, and, the one turns to the other and says, I've heard that petting a cat is a great way to relieve stress. And, the reason I put this in, other than it just kind of made me smile, is I'm going to be sharing lots of tools and techniques and practical take-home exercises that you can do. But ultimately, it's really not every strategy works for everyone. And sometimes some strategies work some of the time, and then they don't work other times. So this is really about kind of gearing you up, getting that toolbox really, really full, so that you have all these different things to try out and use at different times when you are experiencing stress, but also to recognize that not everything will work all the time. So just to sort of take ownership and empower yourself to choose what and to work with what works well for you. So I've got three main aims of the session. The first one, as I said, is to really explore, like, what do we actually mean when we speak about stress? We use this word all the time. But what actually are we talking about? Actually discover how we can then expose what the cause of stress is. Because it's really difficult if we don't know what it is that's actually making us experience stress, then we wouldn't really know what the correct remedy would be. So that's one of the main aims of this session. We're then going to look at a bunch of evidence-based techniques for managing the stress response in the moment. So when we're actually flooded with all of these destructive emotions and everything else that goes along with stress, what can we do? What can we do in that moment? And why is it so hard? And so to really look and explore that. And then finally, I'm going to share a super straightforward and a very practical method that is more looking at like how can I just reduce my stress levels in general, like not when I'm in the moment, but what can I do to prevent it? How can I cultivate more of a sense of well-being in my life? And I have a beautiful practice and strategy to share with you all today. So what is stress? So the World Health Organization defines stress as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. And it's the idea that the body will respond to, it's the body's response to anything that requires attention or action. Okay, so essentially, when I read that, what I see is that stress is just this overarching term, and it's a term to anything that is overwhelming, whether it's psychologically or physically, and really it's a combination because those things are interrelated. But the most important part is that it impacts our well-being and our quality of life. And I think this is really important because, you know, often we use the term stress and it means different things. So I might go to a really intensive exercise class and it might feel really stressful, like I'm putting my body under physical stress and strain. It's not having a negative impact on my well-being or my quality of life. And so this is really where I think first step is that we need to understand that what we're really talking about here is that our quality of life and how we're feeling and the emotions that are arising as a result of whatever the stimuli is being impacted. And I say that because I think, you know, on the other hand of that, you know, whilst we have this overarching term and we use stress so freely, we've also kind of got within our culture this kind of corrupted view of stress often, where it's sometimes seen as something that's normal and actually acceptable. And in many cases, it's even sort of like it's virtuous, you know, oh, my job is so stressful. And we sort of talk about it and we might be smiling as we say it. And we kind of act like this is okay. But what we're really saying here is that we're using a term to talk about to kind of talk about something that is causing us harm. And if it's not active, it's not causing us harm, then it's not stress. And then we don't need to think about it or conceptualize it that way. But if it is diminishing our well-being and our quality of life, then it's really important to recognize that that's something to look at and that's something to work at, and not to just accept and not to just think, well, everyone says they're stressed. You know, this is something that's having an impact on our well-being. And so it's something that we want to look at and maybe do something about. Okay, so the Socratic questioning method. So, you know, in order to, we've seen that there's this overarching term of stress. But in order to really work at it, in order to know what it is that we can do to improve our well-being and our health and our emotional life and being, we really need to uncover what is causing this stress in the first place. So we need to know what we're referring to. Again, we have this overarching term, and sometimes it's acceptable and it's used interchangeably. But if we really strip all of that away, we want to know, what are we talking about? Like, I say I'm stressed, what does that actually mean? And something that I'll often do, whether it's to myself or if it's with someone that I'm working with, and they come and they say, I'm just feeling so stressed, is my question is, well, if I was a fly on the wall in the room whilst you were experiencing the stress, what would I see? What would you be saying to me? You know, I really want to get to understand, what does stress mean to you? And so this method, the Socratic questioning method, really helps us to explore this idea, to peel back the layers and to kind of get to the bottom line, the truth of it all. So I'm going to talk through the methodology, and then we'll do a little in-person example of this. But the idea would be, you know, and you can all do this now with me, is take a dominant thought that keeps coming up, something that you experience as stress. And then what you would do is you'd be asking yourself or another person, if you're doing this with someone else, these sort of leading questions. Like, what do I fear will happen if X, Y, and Z happens? And if that happened, what would that mean? What would that say about me? What would be so bad about that? And you really want to get to a place where you hit like a point where you've identified the absolute underlying fear of the situation. And I put a spoiler alert here because sometimes it's a little bit unexpected. It's not quite always how it seems to begin with. So let me see if she's online. I've asked a friend of mine to come on with us. So Hannah, if that's okay. Hannah is a teacher. Do you want to just say hello to everyone?
Hi.
And I really appreciate you coming on and doing this, Hannah. And the reason I asked her was because I didn't want to just put anyone on the spot here. So, but Hannah has very, very kindly agreed to just do, it's like going to be a 2-minute example of how this would work in action. And keep in mind what I said before, which is sometimes what it seems on, initially is not actually what's going on underneath. So, Hannah, if that's okay, would you mind kindly just sharing with everyone, like something, professionally maybe, or maybe it's personal, but something in your life that you would say is a cause of stress, like you experience stress as a result of it, and if you wouldn't mind, in like just a sentence or two, just describing what that is.
Sure. Something that has caused me a lot of stress this school year is the current group of students that I have. I don't know if it's the pandemic, what's happened after that, or just like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it behavioral? But the maturity levels have definitely gone down, which has impacted instruction and behavior management, and it's just very stressful.
Okay. So you've got this concern, this stress around the kids perhaps not performing as well as you would hope or as you would like. Is that a fair kind of summary of how you're experiencing it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that's true. Let's say they aren't doing well. Let's say the kids this year that you're working with, they're not doing as well as perhaps previous years. What's so bad about that?
I think that teacher guilt is very real. And if they're not performing well, then that's a little bit of a reflection on my practice.
Okay. And so if that is a reflection, if that's true, what's so bad about that? What's so bad about people, the kids not doing well and it reflecting badly on you?
I think that as a teacher in this profession, you want to be doing the most for every child. And I think that anytime you fall short of that, it just impacts, everything.
Okay. And so if you're not able to, if you are falling short, if you're not able to do the best that you want to, what does that say about you? What does that mean?
That I'm not doing my job, and maybe that I'm lazy.
Okay. That I'm lazy. Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing, and we're gonna stop it there. And thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing that. And you can feel free to mute yourself, but I'll explain and use that example. And again, I really, really appreciate you being so honest. I imagine that isn't a narrative that I don't think you're the only one that has that experience. The I am lazy, what I really want to highlight here is that what started as an idea or a belief or the stress that these kids aren't performing well, that was what on the surface that was what Hannah felt was stressful. But what's underlying all of that is this fear that she's lazy or she's not doing enough to help them. And so that's what I meant when I said it's actually quite unexpected, because you're trying to look at it on a surface level, but the actual stress is coming from something that you're bringing, that you feel you're not maybe doing enough, or you're not able to achieve enough or help enough, or perhaps you're being lazy. Now, the reason why this is so important is because sometimes just by understanding that, just by Hannah seeing that, and everyone else, if you had your own examples or if that one resonated with you, what you're seeing is that you've got this clarity that, oh, I'm trying to solve all this stuff up here, but what's actually causing the stress is this belief that I'm lazy or I'm not doing enough. Now, once you know what that is, you then have a choice. You can have a look at the situation. Now, I know Hannah very well. I know she's not lazy. And I think when she pulls it all apart, if she gets to that, I believe that Hannah knows herself that she's not lazy. And so what happens is you're able to now look at this from a place of clarity. Oh, I'm stressed because there's all this stuff happening. Underlying worry is that I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm being lazy. But actually, when I look at it rationally, I see that that's not true. And so then I can look at everything that's going on this surface level that's causing me stress, and I can say these things have multiple causes and conditions. They have all different things that are impacting, but the thing that I am doing enough. I'm doing the very best that I can. I'm giving it all that I can. And so I can't be in control. I can be in control of this one, of what's happening inside. I'm recognizing that I'm doing the best that I can, but I can't be in control of all of that. And so now I can start to practice acceptance, that I'm not always in control of everything around me, but I am in control of what's happening within me, of how much I'm giving. Now, for Hannah's case, that would be her practices to see that and to experience that acceptance. But sometimes, you can do the Socratic questioning and it's highlighting something that is a different sort of truth. So I had a client who was a young lady in her early 20s who was at university. And she similarly, she had a lot of stress around her deadlines and her exams and her papers that were due. And she came to a similar conclusion when we did this as Hannah. She also thought she was being lazy. But actually, on investigation and analysis, when we looked at it, the reason she felt that was because it had been her birthday. And so she had gone out celebrating and she wanted to hang out with her friends. So she'd put off studying and getting her papers in to do that. And she wanted to go home to see her family. So she had done that one weekend. And so actually, this idea that she wasn't doing enough was actually true. And so at that point, what she was able to do is really establish this idea that, and to recognize that actually I could be doing more. And so now the stress that I thought of, oh, there's all this work and deadlines and everything else, it's not about the deadlines and the work. It's about the fact that I'm actually not doing enough and I'm holding this guilt and concern about being lazy. And actually there's something that I can do about it. And so then, I quote the Dalai Lama that if there's something you can do about it, then why worry? If there's nothing you can do about it, then why worry? Okay, so we've got the tool to establish what's going on, what's underpinning all of this. Now we've got these three options. So how do we manage this stress response? We know what's causing the stress. What do we do about it? So in the case of my client, we could change the situation. We could, stop going out with our friends during exam time and going back home and celebrating and just get on with working. Or number two, in Hannah's case, we could accept the situation. I'm not being lazy. I am doing the very best that I can. And there are things that are outside of my control. And then there's the third option, which is okay, but sometimes, there are things out of my control, but I want to be able to cope better with the situation. And that's what we're really going to focus on right now. We're going to look at these tools that can help us in the moment focus. So, going back to, we have to know what the correct issue is in order to apply the correct remedy. And what I'm going to be talking about and offering out today is that we've got these generic, tools that we can use when sometimes it can be difficult. It's just all feels overwhelming. So it's like when I'm just feeling bad, when there's just lots of emotion, what can I do? And so we're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at more emotional specific things. So when I'm angry, what can I do about it? When I'm feeling anxiety, what can I do about it? Now, I do want to share, everything that I'm talking about today. I could do weeks of sessions on each one of these topics, and we would be scratching the surface. This is about what do I do in the moment where I'm completely dysregulated. And so the reason I say that is because some of these tools and techniques might seem really obvious. They might seem like, yeah, okay, that's, I get it. Like, yeah, that's just like a small little tool and it seems really clear and obvious. But when you're in it, when you're in that moment of stress and you're experiencing it, you're not always able to reason in the same way. I hope right now, everyone, you're all relaxed and you can see it, you're enjoying your day and having all these great speakers. And then, it feels really obvious. But when you're in it, sometimes we can lose that ability to rationalize or to reason our way out of it. Now, the reason this is, I wanted to spend a minute explaining why this is, because it's actually kind of important, because it's largely because of the brain, in particular, an area of the brain called the amygdala. And this is the evolutionary part of our brain. It's associated with fight or flight and some other processes. But essentially what happens is when we experience this activating event of stress, whatever that stress might be, and it feels threatening, the amygdala reacts, it takes over, and all the other systems, our ability to rationalize, to reason, to think straight, go out the window. And that's really important because, you know, if you ever think, if you've ever been in an argument with someone, if you've been with someone who's under destructive emotions, whether it's anger or even sadness or anxiety or whatever it is, you know, you might be saying things to them and it feels like it's just not getting through. Have you ever had that? Like, it just feels like it's not getting through. And it's because of this. And it's true for you as well. It's like after the event, you're like, oh, that was so obvious. But in it, you just weren't able to think straight. And so what we need is this, we need these tools to just get us out of this, allow the amygdala, allow the nervous system to just calm down so that we're able to then, okay, now I've got some space. Now I can rationalize and I can think about things differently. So the generic strategies, these are for the times when people tell me I'm just feeling bad. They can't even verbalize what it is. And sometimes, again, going back, if you understand the amygdala, you're just not able to. You're not even able to rationally say or verbalize what it is that's causing so much stress. So, you know, I'm sure everyone here has heard about mindful breathing. Maybe you practice it yourself. There are lots of different strategies. The one that I like to introduce in these settings is the 4-7-8. And so you can do this with me now. Get yourself nice and comfortable and take a 4-second breathe in. So you breathe in and in your head, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold it. And then count in your head again. You want to count up to 7. It's really important. I'll explain why in a minute, but you want to count up to 7 whilst you're holding the breath. And then you exhale forcefully through the mouth, but you're making this whooshing sound like, and you can do this with me right now. You're breathing this whooshing sound out for 8 seconds. Now, the reason I like this one, there's several reasons actually. So firstly, as we know, if our out breath is longer than our in breath, we're forcing the system, we're forcing our nervous system to calm down. You know, we know about the mind-body interaction. If a relaxed body relaxes the mind. So we're literally holding the breath. It's all causing everything. The heart can't pump as much. We're just forcing ourselves to calm down, to let the amygdala start to relax. The other thing is the counting. So the reason why it's really important to count, I know we probably all think we're really good at multitasking, but actually the way that the mind works is you can only ever have one mind moment at a time. So your mind can actually only be focused on one thing. So if you're a good multitasker, all that means is you're able to flip your attention between lots of different things. But actually, when you're really focusing on the counting, you're able to also have a break from the thinking, from the thought, from the idea of the stress, or even the feeling of the stress, because you're really focused on the counting. So that's why I like this one. And it's just a really, really nice way to kind of shift the mind, shift the focus. And then finally, this whooshing sound, you know, I'm sure how many times do we sit down, we go, oh, and we don't even know why we do it. It's just this natural, this natural effect that we have. And sighing, what we know is this sighing, this release of the air is another way to just tell the body, I'm safe, I can relax. It's nice. It's, you know, everything's okay. So we're doing this whooshing sound. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, I'm okay, I'm safe, everything's okay. So that's a really nice one for when you're just feeling overwhelmed, or if you're with someone that is, you just get them to do some of this sort of breathing, and it really helps to downregulate. Now, another one, if you're a visual person, this one works really well, is the waves in the ocean technique. So here what you're doing is, so often people will say like, it's just nonstop. I'm just feeling so bad. I've got so much anxiety. It's nonstop. And what we know is that actually our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, they come and go. And we liken it to this idea of waves in the ocean. So I'm out in Southern California, and I sit on the beach and I watch the waves. And, sometimes when there's a storm, what I see is like there are these really, really big waves coming, and there might be like one huge one, and then like another one comes, and then like a smaller one comes. And then like there might be a break for like a couple of seconds, and then another huge one comes. And the point here is that, it's that these thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, they're coming and going, and it feels constant. But actually, when we really, when we try to connect it to waves, when we literally watch the wave of our thought or feel the wave of our emotion come, what we see is that it's not constant. There are breaks, even if they're super, super, super small. So the idea here is, if you're a visual person, is that you start to connect this wave with the thought or with the feeling that you're experiencing. And you just allow yourself to see the changes. And then, you might pick up your phone and you're like texting, and then you go back and it's like, oh, what happened to the wave? And then there it comes again. And so you're just starting to become really familiar with the constant impermanence of the waves, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotion. Now, if you're less visual, I'm sure by now, I'm sure all of you are acceptance and commitment therapy, experts. So I probably can't teach you too much, but this is my favorite strategy from acceptance commitment therapy. And this is distancing. It's thought-based distancing. And this one I really like because I'm actually not such a visual person. So this would be the idea of, let's take Hannah's thought. Let's take the thought, I am lazy. Okay, now I am lazy it's like right here in front of me. It's really like in your face. I am lazy. It's objective. It's factual. Walking around like that, I'm not going to feel great about myself if I'm walking around with the thought, I am lazy. But watch what happens if I just change it a little bit to, I think I am lazy. Okay, there's a little bit more space here now. I think it's subjective. I might be lazy, but I also might not. It's a thought. It's not factual. I'm having the thought, but there's a bit more room there. And then notice again what happens if I shift it one more time to, I notice that I'm thinking that I am lazy. So now I have loads of space. There's that thought again. Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, there it is. I noticed that I'm thinking that I'm lazy. Okay, wow, that's interesting. My amygdala can calm down because I'm not in any immediate threat, because it's not that I am lazy. I'm just, oh, there it is. I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I am lazy. There it is. So now we've created that space. We've created that room. We're able to start to relax, start to, allow the rational mind to come back in. So we've spoken a bit, those are the sort of general strategies that you can use, whether it's for yourself, whether you're supporting someone who's experiencing emotional dysregulation or stress, and you can sort of share that with them in the moment. Really, really, really useful. But then sometimes it's really obvious what's going on. So I'm going to talk about 4 different sort of destructive emotions. And again, like I said, each one of these, I could talk for weeks just on anger, so, but this is about like in that moment when I'm completely flooded with feelings of anger, what can I do about it? Now, it's a really interesting one because we're told, so like anger, we don't want to go around being angry, and we're told to suppress certain things. Like, it's not okay when we're feeling angry to like, pick up a chair and like smash it or something, like, even if we feel like it, we don't want to do that. And we're told, and there are consequences to doing those things. So it's this weird dynamic where we've got this anger is like, I mean, everything's energy, but anger, there's like this big flood of energy. And it's like, and then we're told we shouldn't act on it. So what do we do with that? So we want to find effective channels or effective strategies to channel this energy. So, and it's all about, how can I do this stuff with keeping myself safe? So punching cushions is a really, really good one. You get, or a punch bag, you get out that stress, you get out that energy, you're able to transform it, but it's not in a way that's hurting you or anyone else. The long walk screaming out, I should probably explain that one, because you probably don't just want to walk around going for a walk screaming out loud. But this one, I offered this one out and people started to use it and they really like it. So it's sort of one of my main in the toolbox kind of ones, which is, I don't know whether you have a dog or not is absolutely irrelevant. Get yourself a dog leash. Okay, you just get yourself a dog leash and you go out and you go into an open park or a place where there's loads of space, and you start screaming your dog's name. So, everyone around you thinks you're just calling your dog's name. You don't have to do it hysterically, because then probably people will come up, oh, where's your dog? Do you need help? But you just I don't know, say your dog's name is Poppy, Poppy, Poppy. You're just having a space to be able to scream, to use your voice, to say it out loud, but without it causing too much of an impact, without it sort of seeming too weird. You're holding your dog leash. It's pretty obvious that you're just calling your dog to anyone around. Squeezing wet tea towel, there's something really therapeutic in that. You take your tea towel, you soak it in loads and loads of water, and you just wring it out. It's like it's got a really, really nice, stressy kind of releasing feel to it. And squeezing ice cubes, for all of you who are working with kids who are experiencing or engaging in any kind of self-harm, in the inpatient setting, this was always one of the most effective strategies, because you're still getting that sensation. You take an ice cube or an ice pack or something, you're still getting that sensation of that very, very physicality, but it's not harmful, and you're not hurting yourself, and you're still able to work with that kind of emotion, that pent up emotion where you want to feel something, and you get to feel it, but in a way that's safe. So then we have anxiety. So, I've got here understanding that thoughts are not the problem, but reactivity to thoughts is the problem. So in preparation for today, I put something up on social media that this would be the topic that I was talking about, and someone sent me a message and said, oh, I've been thinking about this recently, that I actually think that it's not really the stress that's the problem, but it's that we get stressed about being stressed. And that's exactly right. It really is that there's what's happening, and then there's our relationship to what's happening. And we call this actually the 2 pillars of mindfulness: what's happening and our relationship. There's the stress, and then there's our relationship to that stress. Now, again, I could talk about this for hours and hours, but the one most cutting strategy, I would say, and it's really contrary to what we believe when we're experiencing anxiety or worry, is that you always have hoped, no matter what is happening. It's that recognition. And so I've said here, I'm introducing to Natalie, who was a client of mine she came to see me for just overall sort of well-being. But she was a lady in her early 50s, and she was divorced. She never had kids. She was living at home on her own with her dog. One of the biggest things that Natalie brought up, and during the assessment, was that she had this really, really, really huge fear, this huge anxiety around her parents, who were both getting older, about them dying. Very, very common, but really, really fearful. She would just ruminate on it all the time. Unfortunately, very sadly, about 2 months into our work together, we were focusing on that and a bunch of other stuff. Her dad had a massive heart attack and passed away. And it was, at that time, it's interesting because, again, if you think about the amygdala, she's just under so much stress, there's just so much going on for her in the midst of that grief and the shock and just dealing with all of it. And so it was limiting, how much we could really do together, of course, and understandably. But this was the one thing that we kept working on together, and that she kept, she really did such a great job of seeing that even when she felt that she wasn't coping, that was coping. And she described, she liked the waves technique, and she described it as tsunamis coming over her, that she would remember, and it would be this huge tsunami. But then, that she was coping with that, even when her head was on, under the pillow, on the pillow, under the blankets, crying her eyes out. That was coping. And often we don't think of it that way, but she was coping. She didn't have to like it. Doesn't mean that everything always has to be perfect, but she was handling it. She was handling it. And we're all handling everything, even when we think that we're not. And so that's quite a cutting way to just recognize, even when it feels that there is this tsunami, you are still handling it. So sadness or depression, journal writing, it's kind of like the Socratic questioning one. People they always sort of feel a bit weird. Well, not always, but often people are resistant to doing this. But it's like the Socratic questioning. Once you start just free flowing, once you start writing, often what happens is you surprise yourself with what's coming up, like what's actually making you feel sad or going on for you. So I like to offer that out as a way for people to really feel empowered to understand, to learn themselves. They don't need to, you don't need always to go to therapy and explore all this stuff. Sometimes you can just get there yourself. You can figure it out, like what is actually the underlying cause here. And journal writing is a really, really beautiful way to access that and to get into that. And then not holding huge expectations and celebrating the smalls. I used to think this was really obvious, and it is. I mean, in some ways it is, because if you're recognizing that at times you're able, let's say you're feeling really depressed, but there are times that you're able to go for a walk outside. What you're showing yourself is that actually it's not constant. It's not constant that you're always feeling this way, or that you're not able to do things. There are these pockets that you are able to do it. And so I always really stress, like, rejoice, 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 rejoice. And that was kind of like my mantra when I was working with people. And I thought it was pretty obvious. But then I had a client a few years ago, a guy that I was working with, and he said, "Why do you always go on about rejoicing?" He was like, "Why you always say it? Like, why should I? Why do I need to?" And so, I shared the obvious, that, then you don't have to hold this narrative to be so true that you're always depressed. You're seeing the pockets, but actually it's more than that. Our brain and our mind, and we like to feel good, actually. We ultimately we want to feel good. That's why we sometimes do things to avoid, to stop feeling bad, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be. Our mind wants to feel good naturally. And so when we celebrate the smalls, the really, really little things, we get that momentary like joy of like, oh wow, this is really good. Now, if we're not celebrating it, our mind, we're not consciously aware that we're even doing these good things. So we're less inclined to want to do it more and more and more, because we're not even aware of it. So this is really about bringing it to awareness, about seeing like, oh, actually there are all these like good things. They might be really small, but I am experiencing these good things all the time, or some of the time. And then these little things, if I recognize them, I'm going to want to do them more and more and more. And then jealousy. I think jealousy, I think it's so huge in our culture, and I think we don't really talk about it that much, actually. I think there's so much focus on different emotions and dysregulation, but I think jealousy is it's a really key one in our culture. And it's interesting because often people, even like within our schooling systems, there's so much built up on competition and comparing and rating and all that kind of stuff. And so, it's a little bit like stress. We sort of feel we kind of get told, well, like jealousy, a bit of healthy competition, we call it. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're comparing and rating ourselves against others, and then we feel badly about ourselves and we feel badly about them. And so it's paradoxical, and there's loads of evidence base behind this, but it's actually paradoxical. When you are feeling jealous, let's say someone is, just got a promotion, or they're prettier, you think they're prettier than you are, or better looking, or they're, I don't know, they're richer, they have a better relationship, whatever it might be, and if you feel jealousy around that, the strategy is to take a minute, and you can all do it again. You can do this with me right now. Like, just take a minute and just close your eyes and think about the last time you felt jealous, and the person that you felt jealous about, and cultivate, like, what must it feel like for that person? So let's say they just got the job that you wanted. Let's say they got the promotion. Now feel their joy. Just take a minute and feel their joy. Don't think about yourself. Just feel how for them that must have felt. And what you'll probably notice is that you start to, like, it feels really sweet inside. It feels really, that feeling is really, really, really sweet. When we let go of the narrative, feeling, the emotional, the response of that is really sweet. So what the evidence has shown is that by this, we sort of say it's like selfish selflessness. It's like by experiencing the joy for the other person, your brain literally is experiencing it as if it's your joy. And it's a really beautiful way, because you don't feel badly. you're sending out, you're happy for that person, you're cultivating this sense of like, wow, like this is really nice for that person, you're feeling joy about it, and the jealousy kind of just disappears when you do that. So it's a really, really good strategy for times when you do notice yourself being jealous. Okay, so we have spoken about the in the moment, like the in the moment stress. What can we do about it? We've spoken about it generally and the specific, emotional difficulties that we might be experiencing. But those, like I said, those are in the moment. But the question is, well, okay, so I get that I have to do that. Those things can be helpful when I'm experiencing the stress, but I don't want a life. I want a life that's filled with well-being, and that makes me really feel good in my life. And so this is a strategy. Keeping an emotional inventory is a really, really excellent way to start to cultivate this well-being within your life. So we're going to look at 5 categories. I'm going to explain explain what it is, how to do it, and then a little bit about why it's so important. So we've got 5 categories, and you can do this with me now if you've got pen and paper in front of you. We've got these 5 categories of anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy A and jealousy B, which I'll explain the difference in a minute. These are overarching labels. So anger, we're talking the full spectrum. We're talking like, someone's like minor irritation, like someone's whistling next to you and you wish they would be quiet, like just then you get a little bit irritated, all the way to the full blown anger, like road rage, for example, and you might be swearing, or you might be wanting to, do something that you really don't want to do, or whatever it might be, full range of anger. Similarly, anxiety, that's like minor worry of like, will I make it home on time to bath my kids? All the way to the full-blown anxiety attack. I can't even leave my door. Depression, same thing. Sometimes you're just feeling a little bit low to, full-blown depression. Now, jealousy A is comparing and rating yourself to other people. Okay, so that's everything that we spoke about just before. This person's better than me at this, or that, and it's the reverse as well. I'm better than them. That's also jealousy in like the inverse way. It's still comparing and rating. Jealousy B is comparing and rating yourself against yourself. So that's like, oh, I thought I'd be in a different place than I am, or I thought I'd be making more money by now, or when I was 18, I used to be so much fitter, and now I've lost all my fitness. And it's just this constant, like, I thought I would be in a different place. And sometimes, again, it could be in a prideful way of, oh, I'm way better than I look way better than I used to, but it's like this constant comparing and rating yourself against yourself. Now, what I'd like you to do as I'm kind of talking this through is just take a few minutes and think in the past week, like get an average for each of these. Get an average for your anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy A, jealousy B out of 10. So 10 is like, I felt angry, so angry so much of the time. And you're looking really at 3 different things. You're looking at the intensity. So I was full blown road rage, like 4 times this week, really, really, really angry. You're also looking though at frequency. So maybe you're not full blown, but maybe that, that whistling, that person that you work with that whistles just all the time, like every single day, there was like these little pockets of like irritation that would just come up. That would also mean quite a high score. And also duration. So, like how long did it last for? So maybe I felt really, really angry. There was one episode and then it just like lingered all week. It only happened once, but it was just with me all week. And so you want to look at, and don't overguess it, don't worry, but you just want to look in general, what are my destructive emotions like? Because this is what we're talking about when we mean stress. We're talking about essentially these destructive emotions that we're experiencing as a result of thoughts or situations or whatever else. But it's how we're then experiencing that. And largely, not always, but largely it kind of falls under these categories. So you just want to get yourself an overarching score. And the reason this is so important, this is the why, like how does this even work, is because, again, going back to that initial point of what stress is, we use these overarching terms, but without even realizing like how emotionally that's presenting, without even being aware of that, having this conscious awareness, of what's going on internally for us from an emotional perspective, we can sort of we say all these things, we blame all these other things, we say it's because of X, Y, and Z happening. But ultimately, if we weren't experiencing anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy, on the whole, if we weren't experiencing it, would it be stressful? Would it be impacting our well-being? The situation might have elements of stress to it, but would we be experiencing it as impacting our well-being? And so that's why you want to really start to bring this into awareness. You want to see for yourself, like, where am I experiencing these destructive emotions? Now, I wouldn't be speaking to a bunch of teachers if I didn't. It wouldn't be appropriate to not set some homework. But it's interesting, this, because what happens if you start to keep this emotional inventory every day? So we did an overarching weekly score, but if you start to do this every day, truly, and this is my practice as well, every single day I look at those 5 things, and at the end of the day I do a score, like, what was my jealousy like? What was my anxiety like? What was my anger like? Something very beautiful happens. Initially, firstly, what happens is all your scores go up because you start to calibrate, you're becoming more aware of it. And you start to think, oh my goodness, like, what's wrong with me? Everything, I'm crazy. I'm walking around and I'm just like, I'm judging this person, I'm comparing myself there, and I'm angry about this, and I get irritated. And you start to think like, oh, this is not good. But then what happens is, with this awareness, your scores start to naturally decline. I mean, they say just by doing this, not by doing anything else, your scores will start to reduce naturally by 30%. And the reason is that you start to catch yourself. You see, you're not comparing and rating yourself so much. So now, if I'm not comparing and rating myself to other people, then do I have as much stress about, my own, like, how well I'm doing? Like, how well I'm doing? Is it about how well I'm doing, or is it how well I'm doing in comparison to other people, or comparison to myself? If I'm now aware of that, and I brought this into awareness, suddenly I'm able to catch myself, like starting to manifest and be getting caught up in these destructive emotions, and your scores will naturally start to reduce. And then there are other things that you can start to put into place, but this is just a really, really beautiful way to start to bring all of this into conscious awareness, into your daily life practice, so that your emotional well-being just becomes more stable, you become more aware, and you're able to cope better with whatever comes up for you. Okay, so time, great. So I've put some suggested readings here. I think some of them have been copied over. At the very bottom of this, I've got my own book, Bite Size Piece, which is coming out at the end of the month. That is about if food, eating, or body image is your cause of stress. Okay, because sometimes that's the cause for people. So anything relating to yo-yo dieting or not feeling good about your body, or if you cope with stress through food and eating, then this has tons and tons of worksheets and practical advice and tips and tools and everything like that. So that would be a good resource for that. But I put it at the bottom of the list because all these other ones are wonderful and will be really, really great if you want to explore some of the concepts and more that I've been speaking about today. As always, if you want to reach out, I'd be delighted to hear from any of you, or from all of you. You can catch me in the normal ways, Instagram, email, Facebook. I don't think my website's on there, but it's just drromiran.com. Yes, and thank you so much. And I hope we have time for questions and answers. I'll stop sharing the screen. And yes, I welcome any questions if we have time for that. I know there are the breakout groups as well, but yeah, I'd be delighted to answer.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Romi, we do want to, first of all, thank you for such a wonderful insight about stress and ways to deal with it. Certainly something that all of us, regardless of what we're doing in education, can relate to, both probably personally and professionally. And I know I walked away with tons of great notes and ideas, and really appreciate your perspective and just the way that you demonstrated it as well with Hannah. That was really, really great as well, to kind of show it and not just tell it. So we do want to open the floor up for some questions here. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to unmute and go on Spotlight to ask your question directly. And then I always like to kick things off by just kind of asking a question while people are having a moment to type in the chat window. So I'll ask my question for you. So you have 2 young children, I saw in your bio. And for those of us who have children, whether they're younger or older, or if you don't have children, it doesn't matter. You can imagine that this connection will probably find somewhere in your life. So also having young children myself, what do you find if your children are at the age where you can teach them these things? What do you find is a good way to teach young children these sorts of principles in an age appropriate way? And I'm sure that that might be valuable for the parents in the room as well as for the teachers working with their students as well. So if you could just speak to a little bit how you teach this in age appropriate ways to younger children.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a probably unusual approach, which is that I am all about really, really teaching emotional responsibility right from the get-go for my kids. And in answer of age appropriateness, I actually have found that, obviously the way that I might describe things would be would be using the kind of the vocabulary, or kind of explaining it in a way that I think that they would understand. But the concept is really clear, which is that it's about, from a very, very young age. My kids, I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and for as long as I can remember, it's really been about empowering them to realize that they are in control, they are responsible for their emotional world and their emotional well-being. I think this goes so against the grain of what is being expressed out there, of that, oh, it's the things out there that make us feel bad inside. But it's really about letting them see it. So letting them see that, that whilst, so if my son is upset that, he's angry because I won't let him have another ice pop, let's say, something that is, I think many people can relate to. So if he's upset that he can't have another ice pop, it's firstly, it's about recognizing that, asking him to recognize how he feels when he has too much sugar, or too much food, or too much of whatever it might be. How does his body feel? How does his mind react? And letting him see it again and again. And let's say he does have the second ice pop, and then he has a temper tantrum. It's helping him to see, do you see the connection there? So he's starting to learn. It's not me telling him, it's letting him see it for himself and experiencing that. But then more sometimes, he won't get the extra ice pop, and he'll be really upset about it. And the point that I would say at that point, for him in that moment, is that he is free to continue being angry, upset about it, but he's also free not to. And so right from this very, very, very beginning age, really, really young, and I was doing this right when they were super young, and I do this with clients as well. It's about recognizing that you have this capacity to make this choice. The emotion is there, and we don't have a problem with the emotion, but you're free to choose what to do with that emotion. Now, sometimes if going back to this point about the amygdala hijack, if he's really, really in it, and he's not able to listen to me, then I will just take a step back and just let him calm down. And that's true. When I work with couples, that's true as well. I say, if you two are in an argument and one person has gone to that point where they're just under the influence, we say, of destructive emotions, don't engage at that point. Let's take a break. So I'll say to my son, Ruben, you know what, Ruben, I can see you're really upset. We're going to take a break. We can talk about this afterwards. There's no point in me trying to teach him in that moment. And for all of you who are teachers out there, there's no point in, whether it's kids, whatever age, partners, whoever you're dealing with, there's no point trying to teach someone something rationally when they're under destructive emotions. In that moment, you can give them a strategy to try and help them get out of it. Some of the things we've spoken about. Why don't you try breathing? Let's do this together. Hey, Ruben, let's try breathe, hold, and we do that together. Sometimes he'll do it and it will work, and sometimes he won't, and then he moves on from it. And then when he comes out, we can then talk about it, and we can then go back to this point, which is that he created his emotional world. It wasn't something that I did. It's not the things out there that make us feel directly. It's how we then react to them. There's what's happening, and then there's our relationship to what's happening. And all of these things, I wouldn't change it too much. And regardless of the age, I might change the words that I use, but I wouldn't change the concepts too much.
That's a brilliant way to frame it, and really appreciate the practical application there. Love this idea that the concepts are accessible to children. And this idea, I think, is a really interesting one that you're right, we probably don't hear it as often these days, and maybe in Western culture as much, that you are free to choose either way to handle your emotions. We sometimes hear that you're free to be upset, but we don't often hear that you're free not to be upset, and that you do have a bi-directional choice there. So that's really valuable, and certainly appreciate you taking the question.